Komodo dragons eat their babies when hungry. Adult Komodo dragons are among the largest and heaviest lizards on Earth. These dragons live in the Indonesian islands, the largest of which is Komodo Island. There are just over 4,000 of these animals left in the wild. How they treat their babies is so cruel and unbelievable. If food is scarce, then they will seek out the young animals and eat them. This includes their mothers, who do not have any qualms about using them as food if they are hungry. A female Komodo dragon lays around 20 to 30 eggs at one time. She hides her eggs by covering them in a nest mound on the island. But once that is done, she wanders off and does not give her babies another thought. The mother goes away and leaves the eggs to hatch on their own. The incubation period is approximately 7 to 8 months. Once they are born, the young Komodo dragons have to fight for their survival. They are very small at only about 15 to 24 inches, 60 centimeters in length. But nature is a wonderful thing. When the hatchlings are born, they are capable of seeing and running very fast. They are also born with the ability to climb and are very aware that they are in danger of being killed. So they head for the nearest high branches of trees and to safety. They spend most of their young lives up there to avoid the adults down below. The adult dragons are too large to climb up the trees, so the babies are safe. They live in the trees for about 5 years, until they grow large enough to fend for themselves on the ground. In the wild, Komodo dragons have an average lifespan of around 30 to 40 years. They can weigh around 154 pounds, 70 kilograms, but the largest confirmed dragon weighed in at 366 pounds, 166 kilograms, and it also measured at a length of 10.3 feet. They have an expanding stomach, and this enables them to eat up to 80% of their own body weight in a single meal. These animals do not only attack and eat their own kind either. They mainly eat goats, pigs, rodents, and deer and other small mammals. These people were attacked and eaten by Komodo dragons. Komodo dragon attacks on humans are rare. But they do happen. Between 1974 and 2012 there were 24 reported attacks on humans, of which 5 of them were fatal. A Komodo dragon attacks and bites a boy in half in 2007. A dragon killed an 8-year-old boy on Komodo Island. The attack happened on Komodo Island, where there are only a few thousand people living in the villages. The child lived in a small village on the island, and he and his friends were playing around the scrub land. They were not aware that the huge dragon lizard was watching and stalking them. The child moved away from the group to go to the toilet. And this is when the dragon pounced from behind the bush. It grabbed hold of the boy with its huge mouth and it bit into the middle of his body. It began shaking him from side to side. The other boys were terrified by what they were seeing, and ran to the village to get help. A fisherman was nearby and heard the screams of the boys. So he ran towards the animal, who still had the boy in its mouth. He threw rocks at the animal until it released the child, and then it ran off. But nothing could be done to save the boy because he was bitten in half. He died within half an hour from massive blood loss. The animals waited under the tree for the man to fall. 31-year-old Muhammad Anwar was a fisherman on Komodo Island. But this day he was at an orchard and was in a tree collecting some apples. He did not realize that 2 Komodo dragons were under the tree watching him. They had spotted him earlier and were waiting their chance to attack him. It came when Muhammad slipped and fell to the ground. He did not stand a chance as the 2 animals began to bite him. People had heard his screams and ran to help, but they were too late. He had suffered fatal injuries and was bleeding from bites to his hands, legs and neck. They brought him to a clinic on Flores Island, but Mr. Anwar died shortly afterwards. He needed a rest, but it cost him his life. A 78-year-old man was bird-watching when he was attacked and eaten. Rieding von Burr was from Switzerland, and on holiday in 1974. He was on a walking trip with other tourists. They were on the island of Komodo, but he was finding that the walk was getting too much for him. So he decided to stop and rest for a while. The others continued up the hill to finish their walk. When they came back down to join the man, he was nowhere to be found. After a massive search, they eventually found his camera case and one of his shoes. His body was never found. It is assumed that he had been eaten by a Komodo dragon. A memorial cross was placed near where he disappeared. The cross is engraved with the words, "He loved nature throughout his life. Shipwrecked on an island with killer dragons." These people thought they were safe when they were washed up on a small island. A group of divers were stranded in the sea when they could not return to their boat. The strong currents had made them drift for about 25 miles away from the boat. They later told reporters that they were in the water for an estimated 10 hours before they came across the island. They were finally able to come ashore at around midnight. They were relieved to get out of the water and to safety, or so they believed. To their utter horror, they were immediately attacked by a group of Komodo dragons. They had landed on Rinka Island, where around 1,300 Komodo dragons lived. As the tourists were coming in from the water and resting on the beach, they were suddenly attacked by the animals. A Swedish woman, Helena Nevlin, 38, was the first to be attacked. She screamed and used her diving belt to hit the animal, and as the dragon was tugging at this belt, others managed to get it away from her. They managed this by throwing rocks and hitting the animal's head. Also part of this group of stranded divers were Charlotte Allen, 24, and her boyfriend James Manning. They worked as diving instructors in Thailand for 3 years. This horror was to continue for 2 days and 2 nights. More dragons came and continued to attack the tourists. They had to eat raw shellfish that they had scraped from the rocks, while all the time keeping awake and fending off the attacks. They had spread out on the rocks some of their orange emergency floats, so they could be seen out at sea. Finally, an Indonesian rescue crew spotted them, and their nightmare was over. They needed time to recover in the local hospital on Flores Island, but they were all unhurt. A worker is attacked as he sits at his desk in 2009. When Mr. Main headed to the office, he had no idea of the horror that awaited him. Like all the other buildings on Rinka Island, the office units were built on stilts. Hungry dragons would often gather below, to wait for the occasional food scraps. He was just settling in at his desk when he looked down at his dangling feet. And there was a Komodo dragon peering back up at him. He attempted to slowly withdraw his leg away from the dragon's head and mouth. But he moved too quickly and alerted the animal. It bit down on Mr. Main's leg as it clenched its jaw shut. Mr. Main kicked at the dragon's neck and then grabbed its jaws with his hands. This quick action allowed him to open the dragon's mouth and free his leg. But this angered the animal and it quickly ripped into one of his arms. Most of the rangers were in the cafeteria and could not hear his screams. Luckily, one man picked up on the noise and came to investigate. When he saw what was happening, he alerted the other men. By this time, the smell of blood was everywhere, and this was attracting even more dragons towards the ranger. Some of the other men fended off the other approaching animals, while 2 of them ran into Mr. Main's office to help him fight off his attacker. They got hold of the injured man and brought him out of the office. The other rangers kept the pack of dragons waiting outside, away from them. As he was carried to the island's dock, he was rushed to Flores Island's hospital, but the injuries were too much for the small medical center to fix. So he was flown to Bali for 6 hours of emergency treatment. He had to have 55 stitches, but after 6 months he was able to go back to work. The Komodo dragon has 60 curved, serrated teeth. They can smell food up to 6 miles away. They can run at speeds of 13 miles per hour for short periods. The scientific name of a Komodo dragon is Varanus komodensis. They are an endangered species. Komodo dragons are originally from Australia. They can attack and kill animals as large as wild boar, deer, and water buffalo. For more facts about animals, click on the subscribe button.